What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 38 of the Ear Hustling Podcast. I truly had to think about that. It's been so long since I said those words. So, Eric, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Montgomery. I appreciate it. How's things going?
Man, it's going great. I'm glad you were able to keep my seat warm. I'm not sure who you had it was warm with, but it feels pretty warm over here.
Well, you know what? Nobody can truly keep your seat warm for you. So you know that seat will always belong to James Montgomery.
Does that mean I got a whole lot of ass? Don't answer that question.
You, whether you do or don't, trust me, I have not looked at your ass. Okay.
Peace to you too, Sean. What is up, man? Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Sean, how's it going?
We have a great show tonight that I'm looking forward to. But before we bring our guests on, Eric, how about those Lions?
Oh my goodness. Let me tell you something. I was screaming at the TV thinking that they blew the game. When Atlanta scored with about a minute, like 10 minute, 15 left, I'm like, oh, here we go again. I'm sitting there.
A minute four.
Well, a minute four, well, whatever it was, no timeouts. I'm like, it's a done deal. Hey, how you doing, Spencer? I'm like, it's a done deal. I'm like, we're finished. I'm like, I'm tired of watching the Lions. And I guess it just must be something about being at Atlanta and comebacks. And you know what? I'm glad that it wasn't us for a change. I'm glad that it was the Atlanta Falcons.
Right. Well, I'm gonna say two things. One, I was pissed on that last drive when Hawkinson tried to stay in bounds and didn't get out. I was pissed about that. A and B, I called it. I said whoever is winning going into the fourth quarter was going to lose. Both teams have been blowing leads all year long, and that's exactly what happened.
You did say that. You absolutely said that at the beginning of the week. You sure did.
Yep. Our Michigan Wolverines, man, they showed up pretty good. And I got to say something on air. I caught a lot of hell in a group hey, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
So I caught hell in a Michigan fan group. And I want to hear your take on this before we bring our guests on to talk about our real topic tonight. And that is Joe Milton, our quarterback for the University of Michigan. You know who he reminds me of?
Denard Robinson?
No.
Really? Okay.
He reminds me of, are you ready for this? LSU Tigers, Jamarcus Russell.
See, now
hold on. Not Oakland Raider Jamarcus Russell. It's a difference. Don't get hung up on what happened in college.
Okay.
I'm playing pros. If you look at him in college, dude had the strongest arm I've ever seen. The flick of a wrist, he would launch that thing 40, 50, 60 yards, if not further. And that's what Joe Milton reminds me of. College Jamarcus Russell. Okay. Not I want 100 cheeseburgers for a snack, Jamarcus Russell in the NFL. It's a difference.
Are you talking about because of the strength of his arm? Because stature-wise, they're nowhere close.
True. And I'm speaking of arm strength.
Okay.
Just arm strength. That's what he reminds me of.
Yeah, well, I was pretty impressed when he rolled out in the pocket. I think it was like a long completion, like, in the near like the 5-yard line or something. He rolled and it was just like and then it was like it was on a rope.
Yeah.
He does have impressive arm strength. He has some good mobility too, and it looks like he could be versatile too because they were running some different direct snap formations with running backs and all this other stuff. So Michigan's offensive scheme looked pretty good. I've got one thing I want to ask you, though.
Yes.
Did the NCAA recently approve people wearing zero now? Because I saw a lot of zeros on the field.
Recent. I don't think it was recent, but that's something I'm going to do some research on. I think people have been wearing it. It just for some reason wasn't a big thing. But you're right. It's a lot of them, a lot of players wearing zero this year.
So I was just curious. I was like, where are all these guys coming up with these zeros from? But hey, you know what? It looks pretty good, though.
It does. And as a matter of fact, it's funny you should say something about zero because our number zero, Mr. Jackson, Giles Jackson for the University of Michigan. I'm friends with his mom, Gilda, on Facebook, and she has agreed to come onto the show. We're trying to get Giles to come on as well, so we're gonna see if we can work that out.
Well, you know what? Hey, anything that I can do for our Wolverines, you know what? Might as well get Chris Howard on too, if we could. Maybe somebody might be able to get some mentor advice to another person. So hey, that might be a good connection.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're not going to talk about our show ideas on our show, but we got both of our guests in the green room ready to talk about this topic tonight, Eric, and I cannot wait for this. So, this show, episode 38, is called The Electoral College for Dummies. So, right now, let's go ahead and bring on two of our favorite guests. Randy, Greg, welcome to the show.
Hello,
Hey,
gentlemen.
thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. How you guys doing today?
Great. Hey, it's
good.
been cold here. We're in Utah, and it's been cold. We had a big cold snap. Broke some records on cold.
Oh
Cold
no.
temperature.
Greg,
Oh.
are you also in Utah?
I'm in Utah.
Okay.
Very cold.
Wow. Okay. Well, listen, guys. You guys were on the show a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't there. Thank you for carrying the show with Eric. Definitely appreciate that. You guys carried him along pretty well. So I'm kidding, Eric. I'm sorry.
No, you're actually being factual. Yes, they did.
So now your back is really going to hurt because you get to carry me too this week. Want to jump right in? So, Electoral College for Dummies. So, what I would like for you guys to do at this point, Greg, we're going to start with you. Explain to the audience what exactly the Electoral College is, and Randy, you'll get the real easy one, explaining what the popular vote is. And what we're looking for right now is an unbiased facts about it, and then we're going to get into you guys' opinions on the Electoral College. So, Greg, start us off what the Electoral College is, please.
Sure. So the Electoral College is the process that the founders came up with to elect our president and vice president. They devised the plan to come up with the Electoral College. So the idea was that they had representation from each of the states. And rather than a popular vote, which you would think is the logical way to do it, but they thought of themselves as a republic, and they viewed themselves as wanting states to elect presidents rather than individuals to elect presidents. And they didn't put any meat on the bones. They just said, like they did so much in the Constitution, this is how we're going to do it. And so through the years, a series of amendments to the Constitution and other things, we evolved into the system that we have now, which has been pretty much the system through the 20th century. And so we have 538 electors. That is based on your congressional representation, your members of the House of Representatives, and your senators. And then there was an amendment passed. I'm trying to remember it. I think it was the 23rd Amendment to the Constitution, added the District of Columbia, DC, to the mix. So they got 3 electors. And then they also added a minimum of 3 electors. So if you're in a place, for example, like Montana, Wyoming, let's say Wyoming, because I know that they only have 1 representative. They get a vote for their representative. They get 2 votes for their senators, which brings them to 3. But then they get how many more, Randy?
They just get 3. 3 total.
Just get 3. So 3 is the minimum.
Yeah.
3 is the minimum. And so with the District of Columbia added, it equals 538 electors. And so the system is, when we vote for president, whatever state we're in, when we vote for a president, whether you're going to vote for Joe Biden or you're going to vote for Donald Trump, you're not voting for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. You're actually voting for an elector that either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party had selected at a prior time, who then go and vote for the President of the United States. Now, and I'll just say one more thing about this before we go to the discussion. Excuse me, these electors are bound. They are bound by their parties to vote for the candidate from that party. There have been what they call faithless electors in the past, people who broke ranks, didn't vote for their party's candidate, but it's been very, very few times and very far in between, and it's never ever impacted the outcome of an election. So, so that's kind of the overview of the system.
Okay. Very, very interesting. I know Eric and I are definitely going to have some questions. Eric, do you want to jump into questions, or you want to let Randy talk about the popular vote first?
We're going to go ahead and let Randy jump into the popular vote, and then, but actually, you know what? Before that, just so I don't confuse the issue, you said that it hasn't been a situation where there's been a tie situation, but in such a situation, what would happen in case of a tie?
So if there is a tie, which would mean 269 votes to 269 votes, then it goes to the House of Representatives to decide. Now, I think that did happen in very, very early on. And Randy, you might remember this history better than I. Maybe the 1800 election.
Yeah, I think it did one time where it went to the House of Representatives to be decided.
Yeah.
In modern history, it hasn't.
It has not for probably 200 years. It has not happened. But the House of Representatives then would decide who is president, which means the House of Representatives is really critical, whether it's a Republican or a Democratic held majority in that situation of a tie, because they'll decide.
So the Democrats have control of the House right now. So in a hypothetical situation, so it is possible for a candidate not to get 270 votes and it be a tie in a 2-candidate race.
Yes, the way the math works is that it's conceivable that you can get 269 to 269. Now that's got to be the right combination of states to come up with that tie, and it would be difficult to do on a 50-state map plus the District of Columbia, but it's theoretically possible.
All I have to say on that is this is 2020. We're going through a pandemic that shut our country down for who knows how long. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. That's all I have to say.
Are you predicting a tie, Mr. Montgomery?
No, I'm not predicting a tie at all, but I'm just saying if that's going to happen, as Greg was talking, it came to my mind like a lot would have to happen for it to be a tie. A lot. You know, but once again, then I thought this is 2020, so who knows?
You know what? I got one other question. Now, you said that it goes to the House. Would it be the current set of representatives in the House, or would it be the incoming class that would get to cast those votes?
Do you know the answer to that, Randy?
I would think it would be the current, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. Do you know, Greg?
Well,
if it's sure.
Well, we'll think this through together. So the electors come together. I think it's the first Thursday after the first Monday in December.
Yeah, the middle of December.
They go to their state house, their respective state house in each state, and they cast their votes. The electors cast their votes. Then those votes are certified on the first week of January. But those votes are not certified until after the new Congress is sworn in.
Ah, so it'd be the new Congress.
The new Congress would make the decision.
Yeah.
And so, again, who has the majority would be really critical.
So wait, Greg, let me jump in for a second. So you said they would cast their vote the first Thursday following the first Monday of December. But when you say it's going to be certified, are we saying is certification another way of saying counted in January?
That's exactly right.
So if that's the case, wouldn't that be the old Congress? Because the new Congress wouldn't come in until next year. I'm looking at it like, and I could be totally wrong. Congress, whoever it is voting, let's say existing Congress, votes first Thursday following the first Monday. That envelope is sealed. That is held in a secret high secure location and won't be counted until January. So I would think that would be the old Congress.
You would think that, and so now you're making me second guess myself. But I'm really pretty sure that it is the new Congress, because I remember doing some research on this and also some personal experience that I had with this. My old boss was a senator from Utah, and he was on the Rules Committee in the Senate, the chairman, and he was in charge of that certification process and the inauguration when President Obama was first elected in 2008. And I believe the way it happens, let's just pick these two dates. They're not exact, but the new Congress would be sworn in on January 3rd. And then that certification would take place some days later, and it's prescribed in law. Let's say January 7th. It happens after the new Congress is sworn in. So the newly elected folks are the ones who actually make that decision.
Okay.
And I just realized my battery's running low, and I'm going to sprint and get a cord while you ask Randy his question.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
So Randy,
So
enlighten us on the Eric.
No, I'm sorry.
Hey, just let me just give again a clarification on the electoral votes of what we get. Remember, every state has a certain number of Congress people based on the population of the state, and so every state gets the same number of electors as they have Congress people plus two. So every state gets the same number of Congress people as electors plus two. And interestingly, all of the states, 48 of the states, have laws where their electors have to vote 100% for the candidate that gets the most votes in that state. So, for example, if Michigan if Biden wins the popular vote in Michigan, then all of the electors have to vote for Michigan. So all of those go there. There are two states, and I think it's Maine and I think the other one's Kansas, where they have a proportional vote. So that if one candidate gets like 60% of the votes and another candidate gets 40% of the votes, then the electors can vote 60% of the electors for that one and 40 for the other. But there's only two states that do that. All of the other states, 100%, you have to go with the majority with the candidate that got that.
Okay. Would you mind if I bring up a map real quick?
Yeah, bring up that map. That's a good one.
All right. Thank you. Hold on one moment. Thank you very much. So the split votes, I think that's the topic that you were on. It looks like it's Maine, and I think the other one, NE, is Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken.
Nebraska. Okay. Yeah.
Which is down over in the, I guess, depending on which way you're looking, towards the bottom where it says split votes. So it looks like that they have 3, 1, 2, 3. It's like 3 and 4, I guess, electoral representatives. So if it was like split, then it could split, and that probably would play into a tie scenario of something out of the ordinary happening like that too.
It could. So, as opposed to the popular vote, The popular vote, of course, would be that everybody's vote would count, and the candidate that got the most votes across the country would be the new president. But with the Electoral College, that's not how it works.
So,
Okay.
speaking of the popular vote, Randy, and just for shiggles, explain to us what the popular vote is.
Well, the popular vote is whoever gets the most votes. When you vote, your vote is counted as one vote, and they add up all the votes, and whoever gets the most votes would be the president if we went by popular vote. Now, we have to remember what happened in 2016. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote over Donald Trump by about 3 million votes. And if we had a popular vote, Hillary Clinton would be the president rather than Donald Trump because she got more votes.
And I believe prior to that, the same situation happened with Al Gore and George Bush, correct?
Al Gore got the popular vote.
Correct.
Yes.
So, of course, my question is, and Eric, I know you have several questions, so I'm going to sit back and be quiet. Why is it that and Greg gave us some great history on our founding fathers in the Constitution, but why is it that the office of president is the only elected office in the United States that I'm aware of that goes by this process? Everything else is a popular vote process. Why is that?
Greg, answer that.
Well, I'll tell you why. This goes back to the Great Compromise in 1787, which was the fight between the small states and the large states. And the Great Compromise was we're going to have an upper chamber of Congress. We're going to have a lower chamber of Congress, and the upper chamber is going to be not elected by the people. It's going to be elected by state legislatures. So the states would control really that body. And the lower body would be by direct popular vote for those representatives of the people. And that's how they viewed it. They viewed it as a hybrid system where the people would have some influence, but the states would have some influence, so that the big states wouldn't trample all over the rights of the smaller states. And so the
Greg,
Electoral College emerged out of that Great Compromise.
So, Greg, originally, senators were not elected by a direct vote of the people. They were elected by the states.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
And that was changed by the 17th Amendment during a populist era of America. In the late 1700s or late 1800s, I think, where the 17th Amendment was passed that allowed for senators to be elected by direct popular vote. So the philosophical point here is the founders were doing their best to come up with a system. And there are folks who think that the Constitution is sort of this pure document that got everything right and that we shouldn't mess with it. Obviously, they didn't get everything right, and it was really a compromise document. And this is just one of the compromises that came out of that process. Is we'll have an electoral college to protect the rights of the smaller states.
Eric, you know me long enough to know when I said I was going to be quiet, that probably wasn't true. And you're right. So we're speaking of the Constitution, Randy and Greg. What would it take to change the Constitution?
That is a very involved process to change, but we have changed it because we've got all these amendments to the Constitution. So before I'm going to defer that to Greg, but I just got to say one thing about this compromise. If you think about it, the Electoral College gives more weight to the small states in electing a president than if it was a popular vote. Because look at Wyoming. If you look on the map here, Wyoming's got 3 electoral votes. Well, they only have 1 congressman, but then they get 2 free electors to go with that. So California has 53 congressmen and only gets 2 more. And so from a mathematic proportional status, those 2 extra electoral votes weigh so much more for Wyoming than they do for California. And so this gives the smaller states a lot more weight in electing a president. And certainly that's one of the reasons why you can get a president that is elected through the Electoral College and not through the popular vote, because of those two extra votes added to every single state.
Yeah, I understand that, but from a sheer numbers perspective, and I was just looking over here at the President Trump's election when he beat Hillary Clinton, and the first with George W. Bush, and and I can understand that the little guy definitely needs to have some skin in the game, pardon the expression, but when you have a majority that was close to 3 million people that decided to vote against a certain candidate, it's kind of unfair to that candidate that despite the fact that 3 million people voted against you, you still get to become president. So yeah, I think that's unfair. In the case with George Bush and Al Gore, he lost by less than half a million people, and we had to go through the whole recount situation in Florida. But that just doesn't seem like that it's right, to be honest. I mean, I can understand the founding forefathers, they didn't think that all of this stuff was going to happen, but it just doesn't seem fair. And another thing, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, we have all of these representatives in Congress, whether it be the Senate or the House of Representatives, which equals to about the same number of electoral votes. Why not just use that? Let's just say I stay in the 1st Congressional District in Detroit. Let's just say Donald Trump just happens to win Detroit. Then by proxy, my representative should be voting how the district won. So I think that may be a slightly better way. I don't know. Am I wrong for thinking that way?
No, this feels wrong. It feels like my vote doesn't really matter, doesn't have much weight, the way we've got this with the Electoral College.
Yeah, and let me respond to that, because you're exactly right. And this is something else that happened at the founding. The founding fathers did not anticipate that there would be this huge disparity of population between the states. So, New York and Montana, they didn't really think about that. They were all lined up along the East Coast, relatively similar, and they didn't think that there would be these great disparities. So one of the reforms that has been proposed for the Electoral College is to do exactly what you just described, which is to make the Electoral College reflect more the population directly than the congressional representation. And that would bring it more into alignment, and that would be a good reform. The better reform, in my opinion, is to get rid of it.
Get rid of the Electoral College?
Get rid of the Electoral College and do it the way we do every other election, by direct popular vote. That seems to me to be the fairest, most democratic way to do it. That's my personal bias.
Is there any talk of changing the system? I'm pretty sure not while we have our current sitting president, but is there any talk about anything being done about that in the future?
Let me answer that by going back to your original question about how do we amend the Constitution. So to amend the Constitution, we need 2/3 of the states to vote in favor of a new amendment to the Constitution, or 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate supporting an amendment. So 2/3 is the magical number, and it's hard to get to, and which is why the Constitution has not been amended that many times. Politics really plays into this. It plays into the Electoral College in the same way that politics plays into the issue of statehood, for example, for the District of Columbia and for, let's say, Puerto Rico. Because right now, in the current political environment, Washington, D.C. is a very heavily Democratic place. Well, the Republicans don't want to give representation to the District of Columbia, where there would be 3 more votes, that counted in the House and in the Senate for the District of Columbia, even though just on its face, we all know that that would be the Democratic thing to do. No, to have representation for those folks who live in the city. Because I'm a former resident of the District of Columbia, that's really kind of goofy to me and something I think about. But it's the same thing in this environment. We are so polarized and divided. It is very difficult to get to a point of where 2/3 of either the House or the Senate or the states would pass an amendment that would change the Electoral College. And until we get to a point where there's sort of an overwhelming electoral advantage, frankly, for Democrats, I think, to change it, then we probably are not going to get a change.
It's funny you say that, Greg, because as you were talking about D.C. and make statehood, I recalled a statement that Donald Trump made earlier this year, and I looked it up just to get the exact quote. He was talking to the New York Post, and he said, D.C. will never be a state. You mean District of Columbia a state? Wow. So we can have 2 more Democrat senators and 5 more congressmen? No, thank you. That'll never happen. And like you said, the Democratic thing, I would think, would be it doesn't matter who benefits from it, but if they need representation, it seems like it'll be the logical thing to do. And this is where I hate politics, because his response to that is a political statement. It's for his own good. It doesn't matter who makes a statement. If Barack Obama said the same thing because of the Republican potential state, I think that's where politics gets messy, and it really doesn't seem like our politicians represent me, the people.
Well, and it's the same thing with Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans are American citizens. They are American citizens. And yet they do not have representation in Congress. They have these ambassadors that go to Congress, but they don't actually have the voting power. And so we as a country, I believe, should let Puerto Rico go, let them go be their own country, or give them statehood. This in-between status where these are American citizens in Puerto Rico, but they're not a state, that's crazy. That's got to go. They've either got to be a state or let them go.
Now I'm wondering, is that by choice in terms of the citizens that occupy in Puerto Rico, or is it up to us then? Is it a combination? What seems to be the holdup, either statehood or non-statehood?
Congress. It would have to be, Congress would have to make them a state. And in Puerto Rico, I know they've had some votes for the people saying, hey, do you want to be a state or not? And I think the most recent was, yeah, if we're going to be part of this whole thing, we should be a state where we have representation. So, Greg, would that just be a congressional act? Congress could say, hey, we're going to make Washington, D.C. or Puerto Rico a state?
Well, my theory is if they're going to do one, they're going to do 2. If they wanted to I guess, create a balance. I don't know if Puerto Rico would be considered a Republican or a Democratic, sort of state. But, you figure, I guess, for like the scenario of a tie, you could just do a 51st state. Or if you just wanted to have a potential balance, then you could create, 2 states joining the union. But I really thought that, honestly, it was up to the citizens of Puerto Rico. I didn't know that it was Congress that had the final say-so on that.
Isn't it, Greg, Congress has the final say on that?
Yes. It if they get to statehood, but there is this issue of of sort of free destiny for Puerto Rico. What do they want? And so they have had several votes. And if they sent a clear signal that they wanted to be a state, Congress would still have to approve that statehood, just like any other state. Yeah.
Yeah. See, James and Eric, you guys are too young to remember. I lived through the 2 states coming into the Union, Alaska and Hawaii. And that was a big deal when I was in elementary school in the late 50s. I still remember that. I actually remember when Hawaii and Alaska became states.
So do you happen to remember the Detroit Lions winning the football championship? Because I can't remember
No,
that.
I don't remember. I don't remember that.
But I'm sorry, I just had to throw that in there. Probably the last time Lions won a championship, we probably only had 48 states, but that's another topic for another day.
Well, by simple math, that has to be the case. Because if Randy doesn't remember them winning the championship, but he remembers the states, that means he was a little older, or he wasn't a football fan. So
probably. I was a little. Yeah, I'm a little older than you guys.
I'm not too far behind Randy.
Yeah, you're still a kid.
You're the youngest person on this panel today, Mr. Montgomery.
That's not the topic of conversation, sir.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My bad. I had one other question, and I'm just wondering, is it just me? But when I guess it was a hurricane that hit a couple of years ago when President first took office, was there something about that he didn't know that Puerto Rico was part of the United States? Am I was like dreaming it, or did it actually happen?
Yeah, I think many people do not realize that if you are born in Puerto Rico, you are an American citizen. Okay. And you have free reign to travel to the mainland anytime and go back and forth. And I think he probably, I remember hearing that he might not have realized that. But again, that seems so strange to me that they're American citizens, but they don't have representatives in Congress who can vote because they're not a state. And so, again, I make my case, let them go be their own country if they want to be their own country, or make them a state. Don't keep them in this limbo situation they're in.
I definitely agree. So I think that pretty much wraps up that particular portion. There was a couple of other questions that I had in regards to the election, but it's more or less leaning towards the House and the Senate. So I guess we'll start with the Senate. Right now, it's under Republican controls. Is there a realistic chance that the Senate could flip from Republican control to Democratic control?
Yes.
Okay, yes, and how likely, based on percentage-wise, because I think it's like 52. Does the Republican has like what, a 2-seat or a 4-seat lead right now? Because I don't have the stats up on that, but is it beyond a realm of possibility, or actually more importantly, is it possible that the Democrats could possibly lose control of the House of Representatives? Do you think that's likely?
I think that's much less likely to lose control of the House of Representatives. It's more likely that the Democrats could pick up some senatorial seats. You look at what's happening in South Carolina with Lindsey Graham. That race is neck and neck there. Mitch McConnell, powerful Mitch McConnell, from what I'm hearing in his home state of Kentucky, that is really close. And then Arizona's got another very close race with the Democrat neck and neck with the Republican there in the senatorial race. Who else, Greg? Who else are you hearing about close races?
I mean, the conventional wisdom right now is Arizona's gone for the Republicans. The Democrats are going to pick that up. Colorado is gone for the Republicans, and the Democrats will pick that up in all likelihood. That's the way those races are trending right now. And then Susan Collins in Maine. Is she in Maine? Susan Collins.
Maine.
Susan Collins is not looking good. So those three are more than likely to go to the Democrats. Then you have North Carolina, that is a horse race. You have South Carolina. Even Texas is in play. Kentucky, as you mentioned, Mitch McConnell is in play. But I think those guys will retain their seats. And so,
wow. Okay, so Texas, I don't even remember there even being a Democratic senator since I started following politics, and that's like roughly about 30 years that I've been following politics. So if there winds up being a Democratic senator in Texas, that would be huge because that is Republican country.
It would be monumental. And John Cornyn, who's the current senator there, he's in leadership with Mitch McConnell. Very well known and very well respected, but he is having to run away from Trump in Texas, and it's put him in a bind, and that race is within 2 or 3 points, and so I think there is this potential for this blue tsunami. We already have how many people who have voted, Randy?
Oh man, is it over 60 million already?
Wow.
Yeah, I think we're like approaching 75 million or something.
Yeah.
Voted. I mean, we're going to have so many more votes cast than last time around in the presidential election that there is the potential for this absolute blue tsunami to wash across the country, and places like Kentucky and Texas and North Carolina and South Carolina have them fall to the Democratic Party, and also a huge electoral win for Biden. I mean, I've looked at maps where he's got up in the high 300s of electoral votes, kind of like a Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan kind of lopsided election. There's potential for that. I think it's more likely that we're going to have, at least lose 3 and probably 4 Republican seats and have the Democrats take over the Senate. There's no scenario under which the Democrats lose the House of Representatives.
And also, Randy and Greg, I'm seeing here in Georgia, David Perdue is barely hanging on against John Ossoff as well. So that is another possibility for the Democrats to pick up a seat.
Wow. Okay. So here's an interesting scenario. Is there a scenario where maybe Donald Trump gets reelected, but he doesn't have the Senate nor the House to fall back on? And if that does happen, what do you predict will be his rationale on how to handle that situation?
That would be a nightmare, in my opinion, if Donald Trump is reelected. I cannot conceive of what this country would be like with another 4 years of Donald Trump. I think the damage to this country would be so immense that it would be hard to come back from. Not impossible, but I think there would be some really dangerous things happen if he's in there another 4 years. Even if he did not have a Republican Congress, either Republican Senate or Republican House, he could still do damage as the president with our international relations, with his his irrational behavior, in my opinion.
Okay. Greg, you care to piggyback on that?
Well, yeah, I guess you know where Randy stands.
I think Randy's holding back a little bit. Randy, you need to be a little bit more forthcoming on your opinions.
I'm still trying to figure out exactly which side Randy is going to play. I'm still trying to figure it out.
It is possible. It is conceivable that Trump could win, and that the Democrats win back the Senate and hold the House, and that would be an absolute stalemate for 4 years. Nothing would happen. But Randy's right about the damage that could be done. It's my opinion as well. I've been a Republican my whole life, but I think 4 more years of Donald Trump would do severe damage to the institutions of America. And there was a quote I saw today. I don't know if you know who Larry Sabato is, but Larry Sabato is a very famous political scientist from the University of Virginia, and he said he said no question that Donald Trump will go down in history as the worst president in history. He said historians will not spend 10 minutes on that question, and I think that's my opinion too. So, and that's why I think there is a chance for this blue wave, because there is so much excitement, whether it's excitement for Joe Biden or not. It is excitement to have Donald Trump out of office. And so I think that's a real possibility.
I would definitely agree. And one of the interesting things about both the Republican and the Democratic conventions is that you had people from the opposite party endorsing the other candidate. And I never thought in a million years that I would actually see that, seeing Colin Powell endorse Joe Biden, seeing, Republicans from seeing people endorse Donald Trump from the National Black Caucus. I never thought I'd see that in a million years. And Randy, I know that you are a Democrat, and I know that Greg is a Republican, but to see people so united and unified and decisive about supporting the opposite candidate. Did either one of you guys ever think, within your careers, that you would ever see a Republican endorsing a Democrat and vice versa?
No, in fact, I mentioned that to Greg. I don't recall ever seeing that before on these ads on TV where Republicans are endorsing Biden. It's strange. I love it, but it's strange. I don't recall seeing that before.
Well, there's something else going on, and it is the whole institution of government that is opposed to Donald Trump. So you have Republicans and Democrats who are institutionalists, who believe that we've got to keep the institutions together, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the free press, our electoral processes. We're talking about the Electoral College here, and we can't have electoral processes that the public doesn't believe in. And when you have Donald Trump saying, I don't know if I'm going to accept the results of the election or not, we'll see, because the whole thing is rigged, that's really damaging to our institutions. So people like Colin Powell and like the 50 or whomever security experts who all signed a letter in support of Joe Biden, these are not political people all the time, but they recognize how fragile the democracy is if we don't really pay attention to it. And that is, more than issues, more than anything else, that is the thing that Donald Trump has destroyed about our country over the last 4 years. And
I don't know if we lost Greg there or not. Yet it would appear that we have. I think he might have having some difficulties with his audio. So we'll go ahead and we'll wait for him to jump back in. It looks like we're up against the hour coming up, so we're not going to hold you guys up too much longer, but we've got about roughly 11 minutes. James, I want to ask you something down over there in Georgia. This is within the same context of what we're talking about. Your mayor has had to deal with a lot of different issues in terms of fighting the government. She's a Democratic mayor, and then she has to deal with the Republican governor who happens to have the support of the Republican president. What's the climate like down over there in Atlanta in terms of like the political unrest?
It's interesting because, you know, I hate to merge these two topics in one conversation, but I drive in certain areas where I never thought I would see signs that say Black Lives Matter. Same holds true. I drive in neighborhoods that I never thought I would see a Democratic political yard sign. So it's very interesting. The areas that I expect to see Trump signs, in some cases I see them, but in many cases I see the Democratic Party, and that's very surprising. So it's interesting. I'm not sure what's going to happen here in Georgia. I don't expect anyone, or I wouldn't suggest to anyone, to get comfortable over the polls that we're seeing. Yes, the numbers are greater than what we saw in 2016, but none of us expected Trump to win in 2016. You know, if you looked at the polls, at least from where I sit and people I've talked to, everyone expected Hillary Clinton to win, hands down. And we all had our jaws on the ground at the end of that night. So no one should be comfortable. Yard signs really don't mean anything. Those aren't votes. So we still need to get to the polls and let our voices be heard. And hopefully that's exactly what happens.
Well, the climate over here in Michigan is that I've seen a lot of interesting things that have happened. Was out yesterday and I saw a Joe Biden, for president sign, but I also saw a John James sign. Now, John James is a Republican that's running for U.S. Senate. He's a black guy. And then I also saw, it was just like a mixture of like both Republican and Democratic candidates. So I'm hoping at some point that this two-party system is going to end and we really just have like a common sense vote and just vote for the best candidate, period. Doubt if it happens, but it is giving me a little hope that people are starting to open up their eyes and not just vote blindly based on, 50 or 60 years worth of history in terms of voting.
And Eric, go ahead, Randy.
All right, go ahead, Randy.
I got a question for Eric. Eric, does it look like there's going to be a much greater voter turnout than there was in 2016? Because from what I read after that, the black vote didn't come out, and that's one of the reasons why Trump won Michigan, and he only won by a few thousand votes. And so I hope the black vote in Detroit is coming out. Did you feel that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of people that's been taking advantage of early voting, a lot of people that's been taking advantage of absentee ballots. And you're 100% right, Randy. The reason why Donald Trump won Michigan, to be honest with you, is because a lot of African-American men did not vote. And the African-American women that did vote, they would rather have had Donald Trump as a president because he was a man versus Hillary Clinton as a woman. Now, if you just put the names off and if you just compared the resumes, who was the more qualified candidate? It was Hillary Clinton, former U.S. Senator, former Secretary of State. She was appointed several different positions when she was First Lady. She was a high-profile attorney. So from a credential standpoint, Hillary Clinton clearly was the better candidate. But there were a lot of people, and I'm not here to debate people's choices, but they don't want to see a woman in a position of power, and I don't really understand that. Because if I'd rather take my chances with the best possible candidate, whether it's a woman or a man. We saw where that line of thinking got us. Because of the Detroit vote among African-American men and individuals between 18 and 25, it was very, very weak. It was maybe about 35 or 40%. But the African-American women segment, I think that it was like 75 or 80%. And of that number, maybe 25% of those actually voted for Hillary Clinton and the remainder voted for President Trump. That's how he wound up taking Detroit, which thus took Michigan, which thus took the election. So let's not, like James said, let's not take for granted what the signs say, what the polls say. Go out, exercise your right to vote, because if the election turns out the other way, you don't have a reason to complain because you didn't do your part in order to make sure that your voice was heard.
So, Eric, you bring up a great point that I really want to hear Greg and Randy's point of view on. This year, this election, we have on the Democratic ticket a white male politician and a black female. Do you think that's going to hinder at all the party with some of our some ways of thinking that, like Eric just described, having a woman in power? Do you think that's going to hurt at all the Biden-Harris ticket?
It's a good question, and I don't know. The conventional wisdom always has been that people vote for the top of the ticket, and that's who they're thinking about when they cast their ballot. They're thinking about the top of the ticket. They're thinking about Joe Biden. Is this year different because Joe Biden is older, or because Kamala is African American? Does that change the dynamics? I'm not really sure. I think it might, but I think it doesn't change the dynamics enough to really make a difference in the outcome, because I think ultimately people do vote for the top of the ticket. That's my hunch about it.
Sure. Yeah, that's my feeling. I'll tell you, I was watching those presidential debates when the Democrats were trying to elect who their person was going to be. My choice was Kamala Harris as the presidential candidate. I really liked her. And I think, with her being the AG of California, she has got some great background there. And now being a U.S. Senator, I thought she would be really good. I don't know. I don't know if there's as much gender bias now. Certainly there's not as much as there was 30 years ago, but I don't know how much gender bias there is now. I think race bias is not as much because Obama got elected, but you saw what happened. I believe that Donald Trump, his election was a backlash by white supremacists, some of them, because they did not want Obama in. And that's what's sad about this country. There is still racism in this country. But I do believe that most people, and I really believe this, that most people are not concerned about race when they're talking about who the president will be. I might be naive on that, but I really believe that's not an issue for them. But there is a small minority in this country where it is.
You know what? I have to respectfully disagree, and you and I pretty much agree on just about everything. While I don't think that there is a racism issue, I do think that there is a gender bias issue, and I am hoping that this doesn't rear its head with this election, but it definitely did in Michigan when it came to electing Donald Trump.
Wow.
Like had the numbers fell in place the way they usually do, and really I can't even fault that because Trump supporters came out and voted. Clinton supporters did not. I remember this very vividly that Clinton thought that Michigan was locked up. So the last 10 days of her campaign, she did not do any campaigning in Michigan. Trump heavily campaigned in Michigan. That's where the famous quote came in. Well, hey, what have you got to lose in terms of voting for me? That's where that famous expression came in. That actually happened in Detroit. So people were like, well, Hillary's not really campaigning in here. Well, what do we have to lose? And bam, there you go. So it just so happens that he said the right thing at the right time, at the right place to the right people. And if an election can change that quickly within 10 days, it brings me worry. that it could happen again. Gas prices are down. There's talk of these stimulus checks. And to Trump's credit, there are some things that he did as far as, I guess, piggybacking off of the historical black colleges. He did basically re-sign that bill that was initiated probably 2 or 3 presidents ago. I want to say it was either George Bush or Bill Clinton that allocated funds to historically black colleges. So basically, they would just go ahead and just continue with the funding from the existing administrations. But a lot of people really aren't paying attention to what's going on and how things are happening. So I know that there's a lot of, bills that the president's basically just re-signed and it just continues funding. So granted, they did sign it into law. They didn't have to, but the way that the wording is, it made it sound like that it was generated from a particular person. And hey, look what I did. Hey, look what I did. Hey, look what I did. It's like, no, you just basically just re-signed the bill, and it's a continuation of something that happened like 20, 30 years ago. So everybody, please do your research on your candidates and don't think that all of this money that's flying everywhere, one's going to continue, or more importantly, it's just out of the goodness of that individual's heart. These types of things only happen during election season. So please pay attention. Not telling you who to vote for, but pay attention to who you're voting for.
Yes, Eric, thank you. You have got me thinking. You've got me thinking tonight about this perspective that there is more of a gender bias than a race bias, because I would have thought it would be the opposite. So I'm going to think about that. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's a different perspective than I've got.
And honestly, the person who brought that perspective to my attention really is my girlfriend. She is a Mississippi girl, and we were having this conversation. She's one of those rare people that really just kind of like sees things for what they are. She is a true independent when it comes to voting. Whoever it is that she wants to vote for, that thinks is going to best benefit her, then she's going to vote for them. But she brought up to me when we were discussing it. She was like, "Yeah, people would rather see a man in office, regardless of what the gender is, regardless of how great or how terrible he is. If there's a chance that a woman could be elected, certain women will gravitate towards that man." And here's why I'm worried. If Joe Biden becomes president, so you have the second and the third people who are in the line of succession are women. Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and Senator Harris, who would be the vice president. So if people are thinking, well, if something happens to Joe Biden, the next 2 people to step up are women.
Yeah.
How are people going to feel about that? And people are really pondering that, regardless of the disaster that this country has turned into over the last 14 or 16 months. People are really thinking about that. So I don't think that this election is a shoo-in by any means.
Well, to that, Eric, I say, what do you have to lose? But
I'll be muting my partner now for saying that.
We are up against the hour. I personally have one last question for Greg and Randy, and then Eric, I'll turn it over to you for whatever you may have. Very simple, Randy and Greg. November 3rd, will we know when we go to bed that night on who the next president will be, or do you think this is going to be prolonged?
I think it'll be prolonged unless I hope it's not, but I'm afraid it might be prolonged for a few days. I hope I'm wrong. Hope I'm wrong on that.
I think that we're going to know on election night. There's no path for Donald Trump that does not go through Florida. Florida and the other East Coast states, frankly, we'll get a read on those pretty early on, I think. And I'm hoping for this blue wave. I'm hoping for this tsunami to sweep across the country. And so it might be wishful thinking on my part, but I kind of think it's going to be a blowout, and we're going to know on election night. And can I say one more word about the Electoral College?
Yes.
We need to get rid of it. We need to get rid of it. It so undermines our processes to have a president lose in the Electoral College and win the popular vote. It's just not democratic. And I think all of the reasons for having the Electoral College have long since gone by the wayside. 200 years ago.
I agree.
Same, definitely. Eric, what else you got?
You know what? I really don't have anything. I think I ran my mouth probably the vast majority of this show. So I'm done. I don't have anything to say other than to thank both of you for taking time out for us. We will be on hiatus, at least James and I, as a tandem until January. But I know that I'll be probably popping on every so often, definitely after the election. And, you know, hopefully the three of us can get together after the election. And then we will. Soleil has a question. I'm sorry, pardon the interruption. But do other countries in the world use a popular voting system? Do either one of you gentlemen have an answer to Soleil's question?
I think
I'm
that
not-
they almost exclusively use a popular vote. They're not always legitimate.
Okay, I'm sorry. Repeat that from the top again, because I think you and Randy were both talking at the beginning of your
Okay.
answer, Greg.
Yes, most places use a popular vote. And all I was going to say is they're not always legitimate. I mean, Putin was elected by popular vote, but we know that that's a rigged system. If you want to talk about a rigged system, but yes, the popular vote is predominantly and maybe exclusively used
Okay.
across the world.
Well, we definitely know that Vladimir Putin definitely has his eyes on this election. Let's see whether or not it's going to be a little bit of a nudge by our Russian friends in regard to this election. I'm anxious to see if there's going to be anything that's going to surface after the election with involvement with them.
Well, like Eric said, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show. Definitely enjoyed talking with you all, learning a little bit more about the Electoral College. Hopefully, there's no one with questions out there, but if they do, they know how to reach us. As Eric said, we're going to be out for a little bit until January, but I definitely will be on social media, and I may or may not pop my handsome face on the show as well from time to time.
You will.
I doubt it.
You will.
Guys, thank you so much. And until next time.
Then from our mouths to your ears, gentlemen, do you have anything else you want to say before we depart?
No, thank you. Go vote. Go vote.
Go vote.
Yeah, James Montgomery for president. Go vote.
No. All right. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.